Hi, everyone. Welcome to Wharton Tech Talks. I am Spandana,
And I'm Javier Torres.
and we're the co hosts for Wharton Tech Talks.
Today we have Roel Peters, who is the co founder and CEO of Roost. Mr. Peters is a serial entrepreneur with over 25 years of startup experience, ranging from enterprise software to consumer electronics and semiconductors. Before starting Roost in 2014, he was the co founder of Osmo Devices, a pioneer in low power Wi Fi. Mr. Peters is a co-inventor of low-power Wi-Fi personal area networks technology and successfully created a worldwide standard known as Wi-Fi Direct. Osmo was acquired by Atmel in 2012. Mr. Peters received his MBA from the Wharton School and a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering from the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium. Roel, we're super excited to have you here in the podcast. Where are you calling us from?
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate. I'm calling in here from Austin, Texas today.
Yeah, great to have you. And just to kick us off, could you tell us more about the first company that you co founded, Osmo Devices? Why did you decide to take the entrepreneurial journey? And what was the problem that you were trying to solve there?
Yeah, appreciate that question. And I mean, when we go back, this is back in 2003, 2004, when we were looking to start Osmo Devices. That was also the time that I was doing my Wharton MBA. I was actually doing the executive MBA program. I was a WEMBA class 29, the third class in the San Francisco campus. So I had my full-time job. I was doing Wharton program, and it was actually my wife and I started noodling on entrepreneurial ideas. And she actually was the one coming up with the original concept of Osmo Devices. And Osmo was all about low power Wi-Fi. So my wife was actually at Atheros working on very low power Wi-Fi chip designs. And by the way, remember, this is 2003, 2004. Centrino was way more popular. Intel Centrino was way more popular and well known than the concept of Wi-Fi. And we were very, very early days in Wi-Fi. But what the insight was that when you have a Wi-Fi radio, a radio technology built into your device, whether it's your PC, your phone, whatever it is, that you could actually leverage that and reuse that radio, not just for internet connectivity, not just to connect to your router, but you would also be able to reuse that for connectivity to peripherals. And whether that would be a wireless mouse or a keyboard or a headset or a headphone or gaming controllers, that was the real concept. And the benefit here was that you would, instead of having a Bluetooth chip inside the host device, you could eliminate that. And then on the other hand, the peripherals, we were able to figure out how you could actually make those significantly lower power and lower latency compared to Bluetooth. So that was the original concept of what we set out to do and what the benefits were there.
Oh, it's great to hear that. And especially now the technology is so widespread, but I'm sure when you were innovating and working on this, that was very nascent. So it's great to get that context as well. And if you kind of had to give the elevator pitch for Osmo Devices, how would you put it?
Yeah, it was really leveraging the Wi-Fi that will be in the host devices, and the host being PCs and phones, so that it comes for free or it's software only on that end, and being able to have lower power, lower latency on the peripheral side. Just to come back on where Wi-Fi was, I mean, again, 2004 timeframe, the iPhone had not been introduced. And so Wi-Fi in a phone was something that Cisco was pioneering. And there were probably a couple of tens of thousands of Wi-Fi phones in existence in the entire world. And that was it. Yeah. So this was, today we can't even think about a phone without Wi-Fi, but definitely back then that was not a given or not an obvious thing.
Yeah, I wouldn't know what to do with my phone without Wi-Fi at all. So I'm glad it became much more widespread. And, I'm pretty interested because you decided to focus on tech hardware earlier on, especially when a lot of people focus on tech software, for instance. So what are some of the nuances of innovating focused on tech hardware versus just looking into software innovations?
Yeah, I think back then things were still a little bit different, and they have changed a lot over the last 10 to 20 years. But back in the late 90s, early 2000s, the semiconductor industry was a very vibrant industry, lots of startup activity going on. When you looked at it from a software perspective, again, hard to imagine, but Google was just getting started, so to speak, and a lot of Facebook hadn't even started yet. So a lot of these companies were just getting started, let alone the whole concept of cloud computing didn't exist at that point. So hardware was actually a very legitimate category, if you will, and quite significant venture investment was going into that category as well. Although I have to say by the time 2004, 2005, that I would like to say we were probably one of the last of the Mohicans there on the semiconductor side. And then from a startup perspective, and as you then have seen over the last 10, 15 years, there's been tremendous amount of consolidation in the semiconductor industry and less of startups that have gotten funded there. But so it was less of a, what do I choose, as more of a, that itch to go down the entrepreneurial path and coming up with what we thought was a good idea, coming up, having a partner in crime, so to speak, to go down that journey with you. That's really what got us started. We were less focused on, is this the most optimal startup to ever be started? Because one of the key things you have to always think about as well when you start a company is, are you the right person to go do this? Yeah. Why can you be successful? The idea can be unbelievable and can be fantastic, but why are you going to be able to execute on that and make it actually a big success? And so it's less of an optimization back then, more of an opportunity. And last but not least, I mean, we were young and stupid and didn't have any kids. So what else would we be doing?
It's good when you are in that spot in your life where you can just, innovate or decide to do something and don't have to think about all the family and what does this mean. So I agree. The MBA, the executive MBA are great moments in life where you can innovate, be creative, and then if things don't work out, you still, are doing your education. So you can basically go to pursue our path if you want to. So I think it's a great time for thinking like an entrepreneur.
Spot on, Javier. I think it's one thing that, why do people right out of college or right out of MBA school or whatever start companies, is because you're in a place in your life where, okay, you don't have high expenses. You don't mind maybe roommating with some friends. Your expenses are not too high. And if you invest half a year, a couple of years of your life and it doesn't go anywhere, guess what? You can still get a job, you can still go, and if anything, you've learned a tremendous amount. So you got to look at that downside. Yeah. If you're so many years further in your career, in your life, you've got a spouse, you've got kids, you've got a mortgage, all of a sudden those trade-offs are much harder.
Yeah, I agree. Going back to the industry, so to say, what are some headwinds and tailwinds you are seeing right now with tech hardware?
Yeah, it's been especially in the last 5+ years, hardware has become quite a tough area. It's been probably more in contrast to software and in contrast to other areas. I like to say it's called hardware because it's hard. Yeah, but it's something that's very tangible, but the cost of building products and producing products is significantly higher in comparison to software products. Yeah, and whether it's enterprise software or it is consumer software, you look at it from a design, from all the way to manufacturing to distribution. Software has first of all, a much lower cost of entry. That has a lot to do with what AWS has pioneered and the things you can do. The cloud, what you can have access to in the cloud from a compute perspective, and how you can actually build a product at relatively minimal cost. All the way to then distribution, where you don't have to manufacture something, you don't have to ship something. It's not you putting things on a boat. We make things, or at least part of our solution, we make things physically, put it on a boat. Those supply chain issues, they're all real. Yeah, they actually, when you see these boats line up outside of the harbors, those are real, yeah, and those are costing a lot of businesses a lot of money. You don't have those issues with software. And that has its ramifications as well on the funding side, yeah. You can actually get much further along in the entrepreneurial journey. In the MVP product that you're building, you can actually get that out there with software, probably at a very low cost, at a minimal cost. With hardware, if you want to get your product out there, you have have gone all the way to manufacturing something, producing something, distributing something. There's a lot more to it in that respect.
Yeah, indeed. Hardware is hard. And when you were talking about this, shipping and everything, I was thinking about this ship that got like sideways on the canal, and then supply chain was, terrible. So there are many, many, many things you need to consider when building physical products. And one of them, another point you mentioned, was like the capital investment required is different, right? You have to build products, not just, it's less scalable. You need to build each and every product you're selling. So I don't know if you can share with us your thoughts on the VC landscape for hardware today and how has it changed?
Yeah, I think it has changed, quite frankly, dramatically. There is still, as we were saying about 20 years ago, there were in every single VC firm, they had a partner that was focused on semiconductor. You actually even had certain firms that were only doing semiconductor investments. I mean, for example, Tallwood Venture Capital was one of our investors at Osmo. That is no longer the case. Yeah. And I would even take it further. Today, people that are still investing in hardware, they often call it deep tech. It's a minority of a small portion of the entire VC ecosystem that's investing in that. I'm not necessarily in favor of that, but it comes back to the economics. Yeah. If you can start a company with a few $1 million, you can do a heck of a lot on the software side. Oftentimes with a few $1 million, if it's deep tech or hardware focused companies, that's a lot harder. Yeah, you just can't get that far. And so a lot harder means a lot more dilution, means the early checks from these VCs, they have to have deep pockets to keep funding those kind of ventures. They can be huge payoffs in the end, but it's risk adjusted. It's probably just something that there's less and less people that have appetite for that.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting.
Now, just one more comment on that. I think on the positive side is I think there is a lot more CVCs, so corporate venture capitalists that have entered the market in the last few years, in the last 5+ years. And so CVCs are VC arms of large corporations. So for example, Bosch, large German car parts manufacturer, they have a pretty active VC arm, Bosch Venture Capital. But even like in the space I'm in today, I work with a lot of insurance companies where 5-6 years ago, you could count the number of insurance companies that were doing some venture investment. You can count them on one hand. Today, there is literally 50 or 100 carriers that actually have or are actively investing in startups. So those are actually quite interesting sources of capital as well, because a lot of these companies invest more for strategic reasons. They look at their own roadmap, and oftentimes there are some more traditional companies. And if they are a potential customer of yours or a potential partner, they could be some quite interesting sources of capital, as well as strategic value or strategic partnerships for early stage startups.
You're currently working on Roost. Could you tell us more about, what the elevator pitch is for Roost?
Happy to. And so we started Roost about 8 years ago, and it was really movement from where Osmo had been a Wi-Fi semiconductor company. We were going up the stack, where we were actually building an end user product. And the first product that we came out with was a smart 9-volt battery. It has a Wi-Fi enabled, cloud connected, sensor packed 9-volt battery that was designed you plug it into your existing smoke alarm, replacing the 9-volt battery, and it would turn it into a smart smoke alarm. So when that smoke alarm would be going off, you would actually get a notification on your phone. That's how we got started call it an IoT startup. These days, everybody knows what IoT, Internet of Things, what that stands for. 8 years ago, not so much. So we were a little bit ahead of our time there. Where we are today in that journey, after a few pivots and changes, is we're focusing on developing a property telematics solution for the P&C insurance industry. So what does that mean is we basically have developed products that do water leak sensing, smoke alarm listening, all the way to security that get subsidized and distributed by our insurance partners who make those products available to their policyholders. And the goal is to, instead of issues or that develop with water leaks, instead of paying out when damage actually occurs, being able to prevent and mitigate. So basically, at the first sign of a water leak, be able to intervene so that it never turns into major damage, so it never turns into a claim. So today, that's what we're partnered with insurance companies to make this technology widely available to homeowners.
Well, that's a great go-to-market strategy. And, in terms of, you've found the exact industry that would be very interested in solving these problems, that has skin in the game, and you're involving them and you're also getting the homeowners involved. So it's built in this great ecosystem, and I'm guessing it's pretty sticky as well, right? Like once the products start getting used, there's no major incentive to switch out. And I'm curious, at what point in your, journey with Roost, how did this pivot come about? How did this idea come about? And for people who are creating their go-to-market strategies, can you tell us more about what this process was like?
Yeah, happy to. And it's actually quite interesting because I'm not an insurance guy. Yeah. Before Roost, my extent of insurance knowledge was paying my insurance bill for my home insurance or my car insurance bill. That was it. Yeah. Probably very similar to yourself and your listeners. But so what happened is when I described the battery and we went to our first CES as Roost and we had a little stand and we were kind of pitching our solution. And there was actually 2 senior executives from insurance companies that sought us out and basically said, we need to talk to you guys. And my answer was like, why? What's in it for you guys? But so the answer there was like, I don't want to say it was a random encounter. They ran across us and actually introduced themselves. But then what happened next was really important, which is we basically listened and we basically said, educate us, tell us what we don't know here, tell us why this is of interest to you. And that's really where our journey with insurance carriers started. It took us from that 9-volt battery. Within a year and a half, we actually had built a water leak sensing product, custom designed for the insurance industry. And another year later, we basically pivoted completely to a B2B2C strategy where we were only working with insurance carriers. Now, and that was all based on that first interaction, that first encounter that we had. So when people are early with their startup, early on looking at a go-to-market strategy, here would be my number one piece of advice is talk to a lot of people, yeah, and listen. Yeah, you're not necessarily there to sell them. Yeah, you're there to listen on how they could see fit in their industry because you don't know necessarily you're not necessarily the subject matter expert in these other industries. And there might be a lot more applicability than you'd think. And I think that's probably, and look, we're talking to a Wharton audience here, but it's probably where the Wharton network is phenomenal. Yeah. Put yourself out there. The worst thing you can do in your startup journey is being paranoid that someone is going to steal your idea. Yeah. Trust me, nobody's going to steal your idea. Yeah. If most startups will fail because of their own doing, not because someone stole their idea. So for a startup, it's important to be out there, talk to people and learn on what are the applications and listen to if someone is using it, probably they're going to be using it in a way you might not have anticipated or for reasons you might not have anticipated. And that's what's critical because that's where you want to iterate on your product. That's where you want to make your product better. For example, for us, we were very focused on the user experience and how the homeowner would be able to use and leverage the product. What we were early on didn't consider was that the data coming off of those products was incredibly valuable to the insurance carrier in the long run. And so it was the data was there and it was being generated, but we didn't see the applicability necessarily. And so your customers are going to tell you, yeah, or your partners or your early pilot, make time for that. Make sure that you listen to them, you talk to them. They have a lot of ideas. Yeah. Not all of them good. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. You're going to hear a lot of things that you're going to shake your head at, but still be open to that input, be open to that feedback. If more than one are using it in a certain way, that one is a data point, 2 is a trend. Yeah. So be open to that and be looking for that and see if you can double click on that, double down on that. And that's how maybe the last comment on that is like go-to-market strategy changes. Yeah. When very early on, we were a direct-to-consumer strategy. Our product was at Home Depot, was on Amazon and Lowe's. At some point, you make that pivot, you make that shift. It doesn't happen overnight. But you got to stay open-minded that it's not because you've done something a certain way or focused on it that you shouldn't change. Yeah. And I think being nimble and keeping that flexibility is, as a startup, you have the benefit of doing that. You don't have the legacy that big companies have. And that's probably stay open-minded, and it might be from that casual conversation that you have with someone, they might give you a little nugget, that all of a sudden gets a train in motion that you absolutely hadn't thought of.
No, you gave such incredible gems of wisdom in that one response. So, definitely in terms of, building your network and making sure you're always sharing the startup ideas and then just listening, right? And listening smartly in a way that you differentiate the signal from the noise and then acting on it, right? And being adaptable and flexible enough to, change plans as and when they're made. So I think those are definitely gems for anyone who's working on their startups. One of the other challenges that comes with that is how do you hire talent, right? Because obviously when you're the founder and your co-founders and everyone, you're all 100% invested and bought into the idea, and you're trying to get high quality talent, many of whom have other options, right? Working for an established company and so on. What was your approach to hiring the first couple employees, both at Osmo and also at Roost?
Yeah, great question. And I think it was actually vastly different, our experience at Osmo in the early days and at Roost in the early days. And I would say it probably came down to you're doing it a second time or you're no
Right.
longer the first time entrepreneur. The thing is, it's hard. What's hard is that you're always selling. You're always trying to convince people to join the bandwagon, whether it's a partner that you're talking to, whether it's an investor, whether it's an advisor, whether it's an employee, whether it's a co-founder. You're always in sales mode there. I think what it comes down to is that people have lots of options. Yeah. But what it comes down to is really also staying flexible. Yeah. People are going to have their own constraints. Yeah. There's people that are going to be happy to take a pay cut and to join an early stage startup. They just get to love the excitement of it. And there's other people that are going to say like, look, I got a mortgage and a couple of kids in tuition that I need to pay. This is what I need, But I think what I found is that you oftentimes can get people involved as advisors or as consultants or contractors. So the more senior, you're always shooting for the moon, right? You're always trying to hire the person that you can't get, yeah, or as close to that. So how do you do that? Well, they might not be ready for you now, yeah, but they might be after that next funding round, after that next traction that you're getting, maybe 6 months, a year or later. It comes back to that networking piece. Yeah. You want to be talking to people. People they got to know you or learn how to know you. Yeah. Meaning it's not because you've talked to them once. Well, yeah, I know a little bit about you, but if we're talking on a regular basis and you see the progress that we're making, people will get more excited about it. People will get to know you better. People will learn who you are and how you operate. I think some of the most important things is at the end is your reputation. Yeah. You are who you are and your reputation is your most important thing. So whatever you've done, when you were an employee, when we're working with other companies, people will do background checks, blind checks. People will know you. Yeah. Whether you like it or not. Yeah. But how you have treated people in the past is how people are going to be viewing you. So be very conscious about that, be very deliberate about that. And how you treat people, how you work with people, that will determine whether people want to work with you in the future. And people want to work with people that they like working with. Yeah. And so coming around, very long-winded answer here, my apologies. But second time around, it basically the first dozen of employees were all people that we either had worked with in the past or that worked with somebody. So basically, they knew us, we knew them, and that's how things came together. They often say past performance is not an indication of future performance, but from a working relationship perspective, oftentimes it is the case.
Yeah, because there's a trust that if you know each other that has been already built. So they get to see the idea, they get to see the person, and you get to see them too. And based on that, you get this fit that is so critical, in particular for the early employees. I also wanted to ask you about if you could give advice for first-time founders, given your experience. I know you already mentioned some really good points that I'm taking note of, but what would be your most important advice for first-time founders?
Yeah, I think, and I'll tailor this bit to the Wharton audience here. So, because the wonderful thing is, whether it's you've done your MBA or you get your executive MBA, you are a highly valuable asset. Yeah, that has a tremendous earning potential going forward. Yeah. The entrepreneurial journey is just one of the options that you have. So the biggest piece of advice I can give you is if you have that itch that you need to scratch, that you want to build something, you want to change the world in a certain way, mold it in a certain direction, you go do that. If there is any hint that you actually want to go do this because you want to get rich quick, don't. And I think this is the vast majority of entrepreneurial journeys don't end in a positive economic outcome. Yeah. That doesn't get written about because it's not a great story, and that might be fine if you're just graduated college and you spend a couple of years and, it's just fine. Where you're at as an MBA, you're further along in your career, especially as an executive MBA. Yeah. You're further along in your career. If you're looking at it risk adjusted, what the potential is of making the most amount of money over the next 10 to 20 years, take that investment banking career, take that consulting career. Don't bet it on the entrepreneurial journey. If that's your key motivation, it's the wrong motivation. So for whatever it's worth, maybe not the advice you hear out there all the time, but it's not the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's a lot of good, bad, and ugly, and most of the time, bad and ugly.
Thank you for the advice, Roel. Would love now to pivot and ask you a couple of rapid fire style fun questions, hopefully fun questions. Are you ready?
Always.
What was the most fun moment in your entrepreneurial journey?
It has to be liquidity events, but not for the reason you think. It's not about the money. The money is one thing, but it's really a liquidity event is such a dramatic change. It's like you're going towards a climax. The stress is probably the most stress you've ever had, because at the end, in an acquisition, let's say an acquisition process, you're basically going to get married to that company that's acquiring you. But your role as a founder, CEO will change dramatically from one day to the next, where the day before that liquidity event, you're in charge. If this falls through, you're back in charge. It's your responsibility you're responsible for the company, you're responsible for all the employees, their families, and so forth. The day after the liquidity event, you're now a cog in a much bigger machine. You've got budgets that you're no longer concerned about raising money. You're no longer concerned about what are we going to eat tonight or how am I going to make payroll. It is in some ways a huge relief, if you will. But also then it's a completely changed dynamic on where you were making your decisions by yourself or with your board or with your executive team. All of a sudden, you're now a part of a typically bigger organization. But still, what changes in 24, 48 hours, the time of a liquidity event, that's very exciting. It's very thrilling.
Who is a world or industry leader you look up to?
It's a tough one. And I'm actually going to go with a simple or kind of path that is not very unique. I'll trot out our friend Elon Musk here. I mean, what he has done, I think, has not been equaled in our lifetime from an entrepreneurial perspective. So if you look at innovations in various industries and how he is himself put out there, I tremendously look up to him and what he has accomplished. And not only because he moved to Austin. So
I think that's something really interesting that he does that I think it's awesome is he can build like the vision of a company so easily understandable. Like for Tesla, for example, it was build a Roadster, the first car, use that money to build the Model Y, use that money to build the Model 3. It's so easy to understand. And then he does it. That's the most interesting part. What's your favorite place in Belgium?
It has to be my hometown, Leuven, born and raised there. So,
what's your favorite device?
Ooh, good question. I'm going to say my iPhone, although it's gotten worse and worse over the years, but it does so many things for us now, right? And I'm an avid photographer, and honestly, the camera in the latest versions of the iPhones has just been phenomenal. So I love taking pictures, especially pictures of sunsets.
And it's Wi-Fi enabled, so that's awesome. Where do you get your tech news from?
Mostly in newsletters. For example, Axios does a really nice job these days, and I'm subscribed to the Wall Street Journal. So those are kind of my key areas.
And, we ask this next question to everyone who comes on our podcast. And basically, we want to know what's your boldest, most unique prediction that folks might feel is a moonshot about the tech industry, but that you believe will happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I'll put this out there. I believe I will die. Or making it more specifically, I can get unlucky, but that in the next 10 plus years, we will reach what is called longevity escape velocity. What that means is that the time that gets added because of improvements in disease management, disease prevention. So basically the time you have left becomes longer with more than a year for every year that you live. And so as a consequence, you don't die. And so it comes back to the belief that dying is actually, or getting older is actually a disease and a curable disease. So I'll leave it.
That's certainly very provocative and certainly a moonshot. So would love to dig into this further, actually, maybe in a future podcast, who knows? But thank you so much, Roel, for making the time and joining us. It was so great to hear about your entrepreneurial journey, picking your brain on all the interesting trends and getting all this amazing advice for, first-time founders as well as ongoing entrepreneurs. So thank you so much for the time.
Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Roel. Now I'm curious about the techniques for longevity. That might be very interesting. Thank you so much for joining us.